Good afternoon, everybody. This is Mike Joelson, National Chess Master from Progress with Chess. Today, I'm going to demonstrate for you a tactic known as double check. Double check is a very devastating tactic. It rarely gets played during a game, but oftentimes is significant in the strategy, and oftentimes will show up in the notes of games. But when it does get played, the results are oftentimes very dramatic. Now I'm going to be showing you the power of double check in a famous game known as the Richard Reti Tartakower game, played around 1920, which more than any other game demonstrates the tremendous power of double check. So the player playing white in this game was Richard Reti, one of the hyperest of the hypermodern theorists. He had an opening named after him, knight f3, known as the Reti opening. But in this game, he plays the standard e4. And Tartakower plays c6, leading to the Caro-Kann defense. This is a very standard way to continue in the Caro-Kann. And after knight f6, white normally plays knight takes knight, and black plays g-pawn takes. Also, e-pawn takes has been tried as well. But in this game, Richard Reti played a very peculiar kind of response that you don't normally see, because it's not recommended in this kind of position to move your queen out so early. But it turned out to work well for him in this game. And Tartakower had a very ingenious plan to counterattack the center very rapidly with the move e5, which at first glance looks like a mistake after pawn takes pawn. Because if queen takes queen, bishop takes queen, then black would simply be down a pawn. But black had another plan, and that was to go queen a5 check, and then after bishop d2, capture with the queen on e5, adding a pin to a piece that was already attacked. So now white is already in a serious quandary, because there's several threats here for black. There's knight takes knight. There's queen takes knight. And there's queen captures pawn. And all three of these threats have to be met. So there's already a crisis point in this game. Now, young players, please note that when you have a position where there's a lot of possible captures and pitfalls, these are the kind of positions that you don't just take a half a minute on. You should really spend some time on these exact moves. So that's exactly what Richard Reti did. He took his time, and he came up with a genius response to all of these threats. He played castles queenside. Now, at first glance, one would think that he simply wanted to regain the knight after it was captured. Obviously, the move queen takes knight would be a terrible blunder after rook e1 pinning the queen to the king. So that move would definitely be not even be considered by master players. But less obvious would be what happens after the move knight takes knight, which is actually what ended up being played in the game. Now, I'm sure Tartakower thought that the game would continue something like this. Rook to e1, bishop f5, for example, then maybe f3, hitting the knight, and then continue on with something like knight d7, pawn takes pawn, bishop retreats, and so on. And it would be about an even game. And obviously, black didn't seem to mind this possibility. But what Richard Reti had in mind was something far more ingenious than just regaining the captured knight. He had checkmate on his mind. So after knight takes knight, he set up this devastating double check with the move queen to d8. Now, one thing that you have to realize about double check is that there is only one way to get out of a double check, and that's move the king. That's why sometimes you can even give up a piece as powerful as the queen, because it'll often lead to checkmate. So now, of course, black's only move is to now play king takes queen. Now, there's two different double checks. One of them wins the game, and one of them loses the game. And these double checks all had to be calculated out in advance before queen d8 was played. Because if you don't know you have checkmate here, then you certainly don't dare play queen to d8 check. So let's look at both double checks. Let's first look at bishop a5 double check. After the move king to e8, white would then try queen to d8 check, and then black would simply move up to e7, and there would be no double check, and there would be not enough power for white to win the game in view of the fact that he's already down a queen. So that double check would not work. So now, of course, there's only one other double check. Bishop g5 double check. As you see, it's check from the rook and from the bishop. Double check. And of course, there's no time to block check. It's not legal to move here and block check because you're still in check from the bishop. And it's not legal to play here and block check because you're still in check from the rook. So, you know, you must move the king. And after this move, there's only two squares to move the king to. King to e8 is one move. And then, as everybody probably sees, queen to d8 is checkmate. A little more subtle is what happens after the move king c7. And again, we move a piece to the d8 square, only this time bishop to d8, check and mate. So this game is in chess history probably the best and most dramatic game that demonstrates the power of the double check.